Saturday, September 23, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports Lemberg surrendered yesterday to the German troops that were already on the march. Handover negotiations are underway in agreement with the Soviet-Russian troops stationed on the eastern edge of the city. While searching the forests on the Bzura on September 21st, the commander-in-chief of the Polish Corridor Army, General Bortnowski, and his entire staff fell into our hands. After a fierce battle with a desperately defending opponent, yesterday it was possible to cross the South Bank Road on the Vistula between Modlin and Warsaw and thus cordon off both cities separately. Several thousand prisoners were taken. In the west, there was only weak artillery activity in a few places. At Saarbrücken, a French aircraft was forced to land by anti-aircraft fire, the crew was captured, and a German aircraft was shot down in an air battle. Summary report of the Wehrmacht High Command on the campaign in Poland from September 23, 1939. The campaign in Poland is over. In a continuous series of battles of annihilation, the largest and most decisive of which was in the Vistula Bend, the Polish army of millions was defeated, captured, or scattered. Not a single one of the Polish active or reserve divisions, none of their independent brigades, etc., escaped this fate. Only fractions of individual units were able to escape immediate destruction by fleeing into the swampy areas of eastern Poland. They succumbed there to the Soviet-Russian troops. Of the entire Polish Wehrmacht, only a small remnant is currently fighting in hopeless positions in Warsaw, Modlin, and on the Gila Peninsula. The fact that it can still do this is entirely due to the intentional protection of our troops and our consideration for the Polish civilian population. Structure and sequence of operations. Since the spring of 1939, there were increasing signs that Poland, relying on the foreign help guaranteed to it, would not shy away from entering into armed struggle with the German Reich in pursuit of its broad national interests. Careful examinations were carried out to clarify Poland's likely operational intentions. The impressions gained from Polish literature and daily journalism, in conjunction with the military measures taken by the Polish Army Command that have since become known, gave a rough picture of the intentions of the Polish leadership. In a series of meetings between the Führer and the commanders-in-chief of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, their chiefs of general staff, and the head of the Wehrmacht High Command, the resulting operational ideas for the German Wehrmacht were discussed and clarified. 1. Polish intentions. The pursuit of Poland's general and military literature already conveyed a picture of the ideas that Polish private and state chauvinism in Poland had formed about the future development of the Polish state. Journalistic demands from the daily press, as well as rhetorical outpourings from Polish military officials, reinforced these impressions. The deployment of the Polish armed forces in the course of the Polish mobilization should be seen as the final confirmation of these intentions. The Polish army leadership underestimated the German military power in the belief that by tying up strong German forces in the west of the Reich, they would be able to wage the war in the east, at least to a certain extent offensively. The dominant idea was to immediately occupy the Free State of Danzig, attack East Prussia from three sides, and take it as an island cut off from the rest of the Reich. For this purpose, the following grouping of forces took place. A Polish army in the area north of Warsaw, just as capable of inhibiting a threatened German advance from East Prussia against Warsaw as it was strong enough to carry out its own attack. This Polish group was to be flanked on the right by a considerable concentration of forces that could threaten East Prussia from the east, and on the left wing by a very strong army in the corridor. The task of the corridor army was to occupy the Free State of Danzig so that it could then take offensive action against East Prussia from this side. In order to provide the necessary support for this operation, by far the strongest Polish army was set up in the Poznan area. In the event of a German attack against the corridor, it was supposed to threaten the flank of this attack with its superior forces, but it could also rush to the aid of the weaker Polish army marching south of it at any time. Due to its strength and its central position in the area around Poznan, Its mere existence threatened any German offensive operation from central Upper Silesia and from Pomerania on the deep flank. According to the Polish Army Command, the Polish Southern Army in the Krakow-Lviv area was strong enough to protect the important industrial areas. Depending on the course of the operation, it could be used for further missions, either to provide direct assistance to the other Polish armies or to attack the Upper Silesian industrial area, which was vital for Germany. 2. The aim and structure of the German operations. The aim of the German operation was to comprehensively attack, engage, and destroy the huge Polish army concentrated in the Great Vistula Arc. For this purpose, two army groups were formed by the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Colonel General von Brauchitsch, Chief of the General Staff, General of Artillery Halder. A. Army Group South under the command of Colonel General von Rundstedt, with Lieutenant General von Manstein as Chief of the General Staff. B. Army Group North under the command of Colonel General von Bock, with Lieutenant General von Salmuth as Chief of the General Staff. Three armies were subordinate to Army Group South: the Army of Colonel General List, the Army of General of Artillery von Reichenau, and General of Infantry Blaskowitz's army. The following were subordinate to Army Group North: the Army of General of Artillery von Kluge, and the Army of the General of Artillery von Küchler. Tasks of the two army groups. The mission of Army Group South was to push through with General von Reichenau's Middle Army from the area around Kreuzberg in a northeasterly direction towards the Vistula. To shield the right flank of this army, Colonel General List's army was to advance eastwards from Upper Silesia and the northern edge of the Western Beskids. Their task was to marshal the Polish forces there in order to then surround them with the units that were breaking in from south to north from the Slovak area, and if possible, to prevent them from retreating to the east. To secure General von Reichenau's left flank, General Blaskowitz's army from the area east of Breslau should also advance in a staggered manner in a general direction towards Warsaw in order to intercept and repel the expected flank attack by the Polish Army Group from the Posen area. The mission of Army Group North was to establish a connection with East Prussia with the Army of General of Artillery von Kluge as quickly as possible, to force the Vistula crossing between Bromberg and Graudenz, and then with a group sent from East Prussia against Graudenz to unite in a general easterly direction with the northern wing of Army Group South. The Second Army of Colonel General von Bock, under the command of General of Artillery von Küchler, was tasked with establishing communication with General von Reichenau's army from East Prussia via the Naru and Bug east of the Vistula, and to seal off Warsaw from the east. In the course of further operations, an attempt should be made to intercept Polish forces that might succeed in retreating across the Vistula by expanding the area behind San and Bug. All operations resulting from this approach were mastered excellently by the leadership and carried out brilliantly by the troops. The first major operational goal, to engage and destroy the strongest possible parts of the enemy army west of the Vistula, was achieved to a historically unique extent. In a coherent series of battles, the fate of the Polish army, and thus that of the entire campaign, was decided practically after just 8 days. The destruction of the Polish army in the corridor was followed just a few days later by the encirclement of the Polish troops retreating from the Reichenau army in the Radom area. Advance forces from Reichenau's army then prevented at the gates of Warsaw the Polish armies in Posen and in the corridor from retreating behind the Vistula. Blaskowitz's army and the bulk of Reichenau's army subsequently turned against this strong enemy. The Polish divisions, which were more and more herded together in continued attacks, tried to blow up the ring that surrounded them by desperate counterattacks in various places. Just as the offensive power of the German divisions had previously proven itself to the highest degree, their steadfastness was no less proven. The result of this series of battles was the almost complete destruction of the Polish armies stationed west of the Vistula. The number of prisoners resulting from the 3 surrenders in the large operation is over 300,000. However, the total number of prisoners has so far exceeded 450,000. The number of captured guns is already around 1,200. The other war material cannot yet be overlooked. The speed of these operations and the magnitude of the overall success are unique in the history of war. Troops from all German tribes, formations of young active, and those of older age groups equally participated in these tremendous successes. The German infantry has renewed its undying glory. Their achievements in marching and in enduring all hardships were no less than their achievements in battle. Their aggressive courage was complemented by an unwavering, tenacious fortitude that overcame every conceivable crisis. Their attack momentum was supported by their sister weapons. The light and heavy artillery helped make the great successes possible. Thanks to their intervention and that of the pioneers, the Polish border positions were smashed, stormed, or overrun in the shortest possible time in order to then destroy the enemy in unstoppable pursuit. In great cooperation, the tank and motor units, cavalry, anti-tank, and reconnaissance units fulfilled the hopes placed in them. The SS formations subordinate to the army fought shoulder to shoulder with them. According to the orders of Field Marshal Göring, Chief of the General Staff, Major General Jessenek, two strong air fleets were formed under the generals of the aviators Kesselring and Lohr, and used to conduct the air war against Poland. These two air fleets completely destroyed the Polish Air Force and quickly dominated the airspace. In close cooperation with the army, battle and dive bomber pilots continuously attacked bunker positions, batteries, troop gatherings, marching movements, unloadings, and so on. Through their contempt for death, they saved the army an infinite amount of blood and contributed greatly to the overall success. The anti-aircraft artillery took German airspace under its protection and was particularly involved in the destruction of the Polish Air Force at the beginning of the campaign. In total, around 800 aircraft were destroyed or captured by the army, and the last few fled the country and were interned. At sea, parts of the German naval forces under the command of Admiral General Albrecht have sealed off the Bay of Danzig since the beginning of hostilities, thereby preventing all maritime traffic to and from the Polish seaports. With the exception of one submarine, all Polish naval forces still in the Baltic Sea on September 1st were destroyed or interned in neutral ports. The Air Force also played a glorious role in this. The excellent achievements in the field of communications by the rear services, in particular the restoration of roads, bridges, and railways, in which the labor service also particularly proved its worth, have made its task extremely easier for the leadership. The Border Guard, which had been quietly fulfilling its duty for years, occupied the rear army areas and made it possible for the leadership to deploy all of the field army's troops to the front. In exemplary cooperation, all weapons contributed to the overall success. It was only possible because the Western Army and strong parts of the Air Force stood confidently and resolutely ready to defy any enemy superiority, no matter how great, and because the Navy guaranteed the security of the German North Sea region and the German coasts. The Polish soldier has often fought bravely. He was broken by the inadequacy of his leadership and his organization. Thanks to the excellent leadership, the high level of training, and the modern armament of the German Wehrmacht, its successes are associated with own losses, which must be described as unusually small compared to the enormous losses suffered by the enemy. Their exact numbers will be announced in a few days. The material and armament of the new Wehrmacht met the highest requirements. The ammunition and fuel consumption of this campaign was only a fraction of the monthly production. The German people can once again look with pride at their Wehrmacht, which looks forward to future tasks with victorious confidence. Sunday, September 24, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports the movements of German troops towards the demarcation line continued as planned on the entire Eastern Front. In the Tomasov-Zamość-Gruzow area, detached enemy forces were engaged in combat as they attempted to fight their way to the south. Parts of this enemy have been surrounded southwest of Zamość, others are retreating to the east and will encounter Russian troops there. In recent days, the number of Polish defectors from Praga and Modlin has increased. Artillery fire increased in individual places in the west. Local enemy attacks were repelled. Monday, September 25th, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports. In the east, the movements of German troops to the demarcation line on September 24th took place smoothly and in agreement with the Russian units. In repeated operations, dive bombers have successfully attacked important military targets in Warsaw. In the west, there were reconnaissance and artillery activities on both sides in individual places. 8 French aircraft were shot down in aerial combat. A German submarine sank an English destroyer. Trade warfare also had good successes. Tuesday, September 26, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports. In the east, the planned movement towards the demarcation line continued. Only to the east of the lower San were there brief battles with scattered enemy units, with one tank division taking 2,000 prisoners. After all efforts failed to convince the Polish commander of the cruelty and uselessness of resistance in Warsaw, hostilities against the city began yesterday. In a bold move, the Mokotowski fort and then part of the Mokotow suburb were taken. In the west, artillery disturbance fire and little scout activity. French planes were clearly identified as having flown over Belgian territory. 5 French aircraft and 2 tethered balloons were shot down in dogfights, and 1 French aircraft was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Wednesday, September 27, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports. In the east, our troops are approaching the demarcation line agreed with the Soviet government. Of the scattered parts of the Polish army that are still between the German and the advancing Russian troops, the 41st Polish Division and 1st Cavalry Brigade were captured yesterday east of Belgorod. The capital of Poland, which was seen as an open city at the beginning of the hostilities and was accordingly respected, was transformed into a fortress by the commander's measures, the restoration of the old forts, and the arming of parts of the civilian population. The attack yesterday, however, brought the first line of forts into our possession in the northern part and the second in the southern part. In the wake of these attacks, the Polish commander offered to hand over the city and its crew this morning. The commander-in-chief of the army commissioned General Blaskowitz to lead the handover negotiations. The Luftwaffe attacked militarily important targets in Modlin. In the west, there was little combat activity. The enemy is entrenched on the entire front. 2 French aircraft were shot down in a dogfight over Freiburg and Sigmaringen. German air forces successfully attacked English naval forces, battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers in the central North Sea yesterday. In addition to an aircraft carrier being destroyed, several serious hits were scored on a battleship. Our aircraft suffered no losses. Thursday, September 28, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports. In the east, the bulk of our troops crossed the demarcation line as planned. In the fighting reported yesterday on the south wing east of the San, a total of 500 officers and 6,000 men were taken prisoner. In addition to the Polish 41st Division, which had already been reported, an army commander, the leader of a border guard corps, and the commanders of the 7th and 39th Divisions, with their staffs, fell into our hands. The city of Warsaw, which surrendered unconditionally yesterday, is expected to be occupied on September 29th after the necessary preparations have been completed. This morning, the commander of Modlin also offered to hand over the fortress. No significant fighting in the west. An enemy aircraft was brought down during an air battle over Saarbrücken. A British heavy cruiser was successfully attacked by a fighter squadron off the Isle of May. A 250-kilo bomb hit the forecastle. Of the heavy British naval forces attacked the day before, an aircraft carrier was hit by a 500-kilo bomb, and a battleship was hit by 2 250-kilo bombs in the fore and midships. Special report: Warsaw has surrendered unconditionally. The formal handover of the city to the German Army High Command is expected to take place on September 29th. According to current figures, the military garrison is over 100,000 men. Friday, September 29, 1939. The Wehrmacht High Command reports, During the planned movement across the demarcation line, Przemysl South was ceremoniously handed over to the Russian troops by the German commander on September 28th. The departure of the disarmed garrison from Warsaw begins this evening and will last 2 to 3 days. The entry of German troops is therefore not scheduled until October 2nd. Relief measures have been initiated to provide food and sanitation for the civilian population. The Modlin fortress surrendered unconditionally under the impression of the German attacks, and as a result of the attrition caused by artillery fire and bombing. The details of the handover will be determined by the Corps Command deployed in front of Modlin, according to instructions from Army Group North. In the fortress, there are about 1,200 officers, 30,000 men, 4,000 wounded. In the west, ground combat activity as before. In air combat, a French aircraft was shot down near Weissenberg and a British aircraft near Osnabrück.
Join us also next Sunday for the subsequent Wehrmacht reports. In the meantime, you can discover many more military history audiobooks on Major Antonio's YouTube channel. Thank you for listening, and so long.